Curse techniques in Jujutsu Kaisen are often overtly broken, overpowered, or just plainly displayed to be extremely useful. Techniques like the Limitless, the 10 Shadows Curse technique, Curse Speech, and Blood Manipulation are all obviously impressive techniques that garner a lot of respect from both characters within the series and the fan base itself. These techniques are not the only super powerful and useful abilities within the series though. In fact, I've noticed that there are several powerful techniques that are used by relatively minor characters in the series that don't get the same inverse or outverse respect that the more prominent techniques do. So in this video, I'm going to be highlighting some of the most underrated techniques I found within the series of Jujutsu Kaisen. The first ability on the list that I wanted to highlight is the cloning curse technique. This ability comes from a character so irrelevant to the general plot of the series that they aren't actually even named within the context of the story. Irrelevant Paper Bag Man, as I will be calling him within this video, is the owner of the cloning curse technique, and it allows him to create up to 5 separate real versions of himself that he can swap between at any time. As Gojo mentions in chapter 69, the technique of Irrelevant Paper Bag Man is actually pretty strong. The ability to essentially quintuple your combat attributes with seemingly no drawbacks on power and speed is ridiculously viable, especially if you are intelligent enough to use the technique properly or possess the physical attributes to make use of it in close quarters. These bodies can be destroyed without the original user of the technique dying. However, Gojo deduces that once a particular clone has been dealt with and effectively destroyed, it takes a certain amount of time to reform it, acting as a soft limitation to the recklessness one is able to have with this curse technique. Even with that being the case though, in the hands of a competent sorcerer, this ability is honestly top tier. Sure, Irrelevant Paper Bag Man wasn't able to defeat Gojo with his technique, but this is due to a mix of incompetency on his part and the very tall order of actually working around Gojo's infinity without prior knowledge of how it works. If you were to hand this technique to, say, someone like Yuji, the ways in which this ability could help in combat is actually insane to think about. Just imagine for a second, if Yuji is struggling in combat with someone like Choso or even Mahito, he would simply be able to clone himself and jump them, overwhelming any of their hacks and intelligence with his sheer physical might. It's shown over and over again within the series that fighting multiple opponents on or around your level is extremely difficult, so possessing a technique that basically allows you to jump your opponent at any time is a super useful technique to have. Now, due to the possessor of this ability being a bit of a pushover though, I would say that it definitely flies under most people's radar. Adding onto the pile of underrated Jujutsu abilities, we have Haruta Shigemo's Miracle Technique. Now, this ability stores up miracles that Haruta may encounter and erases them from his memory. After this happens, a specific marking on Haruta's face appears, indicating how many miracles he has in storage. If Haruta is put in mortal danger, one of these miracles are released and allows him to survive situations and attacks that would otherwise kill him. It is for this reason that Haruta actually survives Nanami's rageful onslaught of attacks. With every punch that Nanami landed, one of the markings on his face disappeared, and with Nanami's last attack, he was able to actually completely erase the rest of the filled markings on Haruta. This means that due to nothing except his curse technique, Haruta can survive up to 6 attacks that would otherwise undoubtedly kill him. As long as he has some miracles stored up, he can narrowly escape death even from characters significantly more powerful than him. It's not known exactly how many he can store up at any given time, seeing as how in the series we only see him have up to 6, nor is there much detail depicted on what exactly constitutes a tiny miracle, but we do know that the potency of this technique is so high that if he did have even a bit of luck stored up from his encounter with Sukuna, he would have survived his dismantle and cleave technique somehow, which is honestly pretty impressive. It's stated in chapter 119 that even Haruta didn't know the markings on his face indicated how many miracles he had stored up, so I imagine that if he was a more methodical or intelligent character like Megumi or Sukuna, he would have been able to create attack strategies that hinged upon his luck much better. As shown in Haruta's case though, even in the hands of a relatively weak character, the miracle technique is able to prolong or outright save a life. Speaking of life, Granny Ogami's Seance technique is one of the craziest abilities that doesn't come from an inherited family, and honestly, if it weren't for Toji being such a cheat code to the world of JJK, more people would probably look at it as such. Being able to call upon someone's body or soul information to shapeshift herself or others is extremely cool and useful in a world with powerful sorcerers dying left and right. So long as Ogami is able to find a piece of the body's information and has the allotted time to summon that person, she can seemingly call upon anyone and even recall them in their prime, no matter the state that they died in, as demonstrated with Toji. Imagine for a second that if instead of Kenjaku, she found Geto's body and had a piece of him to use to summon whenever she needed, she would have on demand had a special grade sorcerer ready to summon at any moment. If he were still alive, she would also be able to acquire the information of characters like Nanami and Naobito directly after losing their lives within Shibuya. Honestly, so long as you're okay with a little bit of grave digging, I'm sure that with a technique like this, you could acquire yourself some pretty powerful corpses to summon that, in most cases, wouldn't be able to resist you. Hell, if a character like her, with her technique, was awakened in the Culling games, they would have an absolute field day just searching through any given colony, collecting the remnants of powerful dead sorcerers and adding it to their collection. The only real limitations we've seen with this ability are the acquisition cost, the summoning time, and the fact that anomalies like Toji can and will resist forms of soul and body manipulation like this. But if you're willing to get your hands dirty, summon your undead warriors before any given battle, and don't summon Toji or Maki, you should be equipped with a technique that has an extremely high ceiling of potential. Now, my personal favorite technique on this list comes from Jiro Awasaka, the owner of the Inverse Curse technique, and this ability works on basically every level for me. It's a super unique and cool technique that I have not seen done that often in other works of fiction personally. Even though the curse user nor the technique stay for long, we do get an adequate showing of what exactly this ability can do, and it's just plain useful, especially if you are someone that is proficient in close quarters combat. As explained by both Megami and Awasaka himself in chapter 97, the inverse technique makes powerful attacks that hit him become weak, and weak attacks that hit him become strong. There are limits to the extreme ends of this spectrum, which is why something as small as air resistance doesn't instantly kill him. However, the inverse ability seems to allow him to become durable enough to tank the combined full power attacks of Yuji and Megami. Megami's Divine Dog possessing enough attack power to slash Hanami and tear through a finger bearer, and Yuji possessing enough physical strength and base to hurt special grade cursed spirits like Hanami. This, combined with the fact that he can easily tank 40 plus story falls, means that the extent to which inverse can go on the high end is sufficient even against high level Jujutsu sorcerers. It doesn't allow him to contend with characters like Gojo by any means, but let's be honest, most techniques can't contend with Gojo, so Awasaka's ability not allowing him to do so isn't a real drawback by any means. The attack strategy that puts inverse to good use seems to be one that engages in super close quarters combat and acts on countering attacks while you take no damage. We actually see this strat almost work when Megami and Yuji hit him with a mean combination of blows, only for Awasaka to pull a knife and attack the two of them, narrowly avoiding Megami and actually slicing Yuji a bit. Now, Awasaka's technique, while powerful, does have the obvious drawback of weak abilities being able to do extensive damage to him. If you're able to figure out his technique and add a combination of feints, heavy attacks, and light ones, all while avoiding his counters, you'll definitely be able to beat him, as shown with Yuji and Megami. Although, I think this is a bit easier said than done. I, for one, don't think most characters in the series would be able to deduce Awasaka's technique as quickly as Megami did, and if you fall for the bait of going for a desperate all or nothing full swing, you'll get burnt very quickly, as Awasaka even monologues to himself. If you don't have the finesse of physical attacks like Yuji, combined with the intelligence of a character like Megami, honestly, inverse is an ability that most characters don't have an immediate counter to. Overall, I think the inverse technique is an ability suited for attack specialists, and in the right hands, it becomes a stupidly strong technique. These are just a few of the many underrated curse techniques within Jujutsu Kaisen, so if you want a video following up with more underrated curse techniques that I find very interesting, let me know down in the comment section below. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.